The phone hit the wall and shattered. Ethan Cole stood frozen in the narrow apartment in Brooklyn, New York, chest rising and falling, as his father's voice still echoed in the room. "You're 26 years old and still have nothing to show for it," Marcus Cole shouted, pointing toward the door. "No career, no stability, no future. How long do you expect us to carry you?" Ethan didn't answer. He had learned years ago that answering only made things worse. His mother, Linda, stood behind the couch, arms folded tight across her chest. "Marcus, don't yell," she said, though her voice carried no defense. She looked at Ethan, disappointment heavy in her eyes. "We just want you to be realistic." "Realistic?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "He's living in fantasyland, always thinking, always writing ideas, never finishing anything." Ethan bent down slowly and picked up the cracked phone. The screen still lit up. A rejection email glowed back at him. "We regret to inform you." That made 7 this month. Before the story goes any further, if you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or told you'd never make it, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment, "I won't quit." This story might be about Ethan, but the lesson belongs to anyone who's ever been underestimated. Ethan slipped the phone into his pocket and walked past his parents without another word. He grabbed his jacket from the hook near the door and stepped out into the cold night air. The door slammed shut behind him. On the sidewalk, taxis rushed past, their headlights blurring into streaks of white and yellow. People laughed, argued, lived. The city moved forward without him, as if he didn't exist at all. "That's fine," he whispered to himself. "I'll move forward anyway." He started walking. Ethan hadn't always been invisible. Once, when he was a child in Cleveland, Ohio, teachers had noticed him, not because he was loud, not because he was talented in obvious ways, but because he asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. "Why does the system work this way?" he asked his 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Grant, one afternoon. She adjusted her glasses and sighed. "Because that's how it's always been done, Ethan." "But shouldn't we improve it if it's broken?" he pressed. The class laughed. Mrs. Grant shook her head. "You spend too much time thinking. Focus on the lesson." That sentence followed him for years. At home, comparisons became routine. "Your cousin Daniel already knows what he wants to be," Linda would say at dinner. "He's going into medicine." Marcus would add, "At least he has direction." Ethan would stare at his plate, food untouched, ideas racing through his mind. He had direction. He just didn't have permission. By high school, the labels stuck. Quiet, awkward, unmotivated. One guidance counselor flipped through his file and frowned. "You don't stand out in any particular area, so maybe aim low and work your way up." Ethan nodded politely, though something inside him cracked. After graduation, he tried to do what everyone said he should. He took jobs he hated, smiled when supervisors spoke down to him, and stayed late to prove he was useful. It never worked. "You're not assertive enough," one manager told him as he handed over a termination letter at a tech support company in Manhattan. Another said, "You overthink simple tasks." A third didn't even explain. They just stopped putting him on the schedule. Each time, Ethan packed his things quietly and left without causing a scene. At night, while roommates slept, Ethan sat at a small desk by the window, notebook open, laptop humming softly. He studied systems, business models, patterns of failure and success. He didn't chase trends, he dissected them. "What are you even doing up?" Ethan's roommate Jake asked once, rubbing his eyes as he passed through the room. "Learning," Ethan said. Jake laughed. "Man, learning doesn't pay rent." Ethan smiled faintly. "Not yet." Months turned into years. Rejections stacked higher. His parents' patience wore thinner. One evening, Marcus confronted him again. "You can't keep doing this. No company wants you. No investor wants you. What makes you think you're special?" Ethan looked at his father, eyes steady. "I don't think I'm special. I think I'm persistent." Marcus scoffed. "Persistence without results is delusion." That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The doubt crept in, slow and heavy. What if they're right? The question terrified him more than failure ever had. The breaking point came on a rainy afternoon in Queens. Ethan sat across from a startup founder he admired, pitching an idea he had refined for months. His hands trembled slightly as he finished explaining. The founder leaned back in his chair. "It's interesting," he said slowly, "but you don't have the confidence to lead something like this." Ethan swallowed. "Confidence comes from results." The man smiled thinly. "Results come from confidence." The meeting ended 5 minutes later. Outside, rain soaked through Ethan's jacket as he stood on the sidewalk, head bowed. People rushed past him, umbrellas colliding, shoes splashing through puddles. He didn't move. For the first time, he considered quitting. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, fading into something safe and small. Then his phone buzzed. A message from his younger sister Maya. "I know they don't get you, but I do. Don't stop." Ethan closed his eyes. Something hardened inside him. Not anger, not bitterness, but resolve. That night, he made a decision no one else saw. He would stop trying to convince people he was valuable. He would build something so useful, so undeniable, that the world would have no choice but to notice. He rented a smaller apartment, cut expenses to the bone, stopped explaining himself. He woke before dawn and worked until exhaustion forced him to sleep. Weeks passed, then months. One winter morning, sitting in a dim cafe near Williamsburg, Ethan noticed a problem most people ignored: how small businesses struggle to manage customer data without expensive tools. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What if it didn't have to be complicated? The idea was simple, almost too simple, and that's why no one else had done it right. He started building. The first version failed. So did the second. The third barely worked. But the fourth worked just enough. A local shop owner named Carlos tested it. "This saved me hours," Carlos said, eyes wide. "How much do I owe you?" Ethan shook his head. "Just tell me what breaks." Carlos laughed. "Everything breaks, but this is different." That was the first crack in the wall. Ethan walked home that night, city lights reflecting in puddles, heart pounding with something unfamiliar. Hope. He didn't know it yet, but the same world that had rejected him was about to change its voice. And it would start very, very quietly. The software didn't explode overnight. It crawled. Ethan named it Clear Ledger, not because it sounded impressive, but because it described exactly what it did. No buzzwords, no exaggeration, just clarity. Every morning before sunrise, he sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment in Williamsburg, laptop open, coffee untouched. He fixed bugs users didn't know how to describe. He answered emails no one else would bother responding to. He listened. Carlos kept calling. "Ethan, my cousin runs a bakery in the Bronx," Carlos said one afternoon. "I showed him Clear Ledger. He wants it." Ethan paused. "Tell him it's still in beta." Carlos laughed. "He doesn't care. He said if it saves him time, it's worth it." Ethan swallowed. "Okay, I'll set him up." 2 users became 5. 5 became 12. 12 became 50. None of them knew Ethan's name. They just knew the tool worked. Jake noticed first. "You've been different," his roommate said one night, watching Ethan type furiously. "You don't complain anymore." Ethan didn't look up. Complaining never fixed anything. Jake leaned against the doorway. "Are you making money?" Ethan hesitated. "A little." Jake's eyebrows rose. "How much is a little?" "Enough to keep going." Jake nodded slowly. "Man, don't mess this up." Those words echoed louder than encouragement ever had. But growth brought pressure. Servers crashed, emails piled up. One night, everything went down at once. Ethan stared at error messages flooding the screen, hands shaking. His phone rang. Carlos. "Ethan, my system's down. I can't access anything." "I know, I'm fixing it." "When?" "Soon." "How soon?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Give me 20 minutes. "Ethan, I have customers." "I know," Ethan snapped, then softened. "I know, trust me." He worked through the night. At sunrise, the system stabilized. He pushed an update, heart racing. Minutes later, a message came in. "It's back. You did it." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhausted, smiling despite himself. But success didn't erase the past. His parents noticed a change when he visited for dinner in Brooklyn. "You look healthier," Linda said cautiously. Marcus eyed him across the table. "Are you still jumping from job to job?" Ethan shook his head. "I'm building something." Marcus snorted. "Building what?" "A company." Silence fell. Marcus laughed once. "You? A company?" Ethan met his father's gaze. "Yes." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "We've had this conversation before." "No," Ethan said calmly. "You talked. I listened. Now I'm telling you." Linda frowned. "Is this another phase?" Ethan stood. "It's not a phase. It's work." He left before the argument could begin. Outside, cold air filled his lungs. For the first time, he didn't feel small walking away. Clearledger crossed 1,000 users 6 months later, then 2,000, then 10. The emails changed tone. "Can we schedule a call? Are you raising funding? We're interested in partnership." Ethan ignored most of them, until one message stopped him. "We've been watching your growth. Let's talk." The sender was Horizon Ventures, a mid-sized firm based in San Francisco. Ethan flew out on a cheap overnight flight, barely sleeping. He sat across from 3 investors in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. One of them, a woman named Rebecca Sloan, studied him carefully. "You don't fit the typical founder profile." Ethan nodded. "I know." "You're not flashy," another investor added. "No big online presence." "I've been busy building," Ethan replied. Rebecca smiled faintly. "Why haven't you raised before now?" "No one asked," Ethan said. The room went quiet. She leaned forward. "If we invest, are you ready for scale, pressure, attention?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I've lived under pressure my whole life. Attention will be new." Rebecca laughed softly. "I like that answer." They didn't sign that day, but they didn't say no. Back in New York, growth accelerated. Media blogs started whispering about an unknown founder disrupting small business software. Jake burst into the apartment one morning. "Dude, you're on TechPulse." Ethan stared at the screen. His product, his words, someone else telling the story. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Ethan let it ring. Then another call. And another. Finally, a text. "We need to talk." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "I'm busy." The funding offer came 2 weeks later. Rebecca's voice was steady on the call. "We'd like to lead a round, 5 million. Ethan's breath caught. 5? She believed in where this is going, but only if you stay in control. Ethan closed his eyes. For years, he'd been told he wasn't fit to lead anything. "Yes," he said calmly. "Let's do it." The announcement went live the following month. Clearledger exploded. Customers doubled, then tripled. Industry giants took notice. Some tried to buy him out. He declined every offer. A reporter finally caught him outside a conference in Chicago. "Ethan Cole," she said, microphone raised. "People are calling you an overnight success. How does that feel?" He paused. Camera zoomed in. "Overnight?" he repeated. "It took me a decade." The clip went viral. Marcus watched it from the living room couch, remote slipping from his hand. Linda covered her mouth. "That's our son." The world was learning his name, and the same people who once told him he'd never be anything were realizing something far more uncomfortable. They had been wrong. Very wrong. The applause didn't feel real. Ethan stood backstage at a tech summit in Las Vegas, the muffled roar of thousands bleeding through the curtains as his name echoed across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "the founder of Clearledger." Someone nudged Ethan gently. "That's you." He stepped forward. Lights exploded, cameras flashed, the crowd rose to its feet, clapping for a man most of them hadn't known existed 2 years earlier. Ethan blinked, momentarily disoriented. This wasn't how he'd imagined success. There was no triumph in his chest, no victory roar, just a strange calm, like standing in the eye of a storm. He began to speak. I wasn't supposed to be here, he said into the microphone, his voice steady. Most people told me I wasn't built for this. They were confident, they were loud, and they were wrong. The room went silent. He continued, this company wasn't born from confidence, it was born from rejection. The applause returned, louder this time. Back in Brooklyn, Marcus Cole sat alone in the living room, the same one where he'd once shouted his son out the door. The television glowed in the dim light, Ethan's face larger than life on the screen. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He's changed, Linda whispered from the doorway. Marcus didn't answer. His jaw tightened. He remembered every word he'd thrown like a weapon, every laugh, every dismissal. The next morning, Ethan received an email he hadn't expected. Subject, congratulations, from Marcus Cole. Ethan stared at it for a long time before opening it. I see now that I didn't understand you. I don't know if you'll forgive me. I just wanted to say I'm proud. Ethan closed the laptop. He didn't reply. Clear Ledger crossed $1 billion in valuation 6 months later. Headlines followed him everywhere. The quiet founder who outsmarted giants. The man who built $1 billion company without chasing fame. Rejected by all, proven right by time. Investors chased him now. Government invited him to speak. Universities asked him to mentor students. One afternoon, at a conference in San Francisco, a young man approached him nervously. Mr. Cole, the boy said, they say I ask too many questions. Ethan smiled. Good. They tell me I'm not leadership material. Ethan met his eyes. Neither was I. The boy's shoulders relaxed, just a little. Later that evening, Maya joined Ethan for dinner overlooking the city skyline. You remember when you almost quit? She asked softly. I remember. She smiled. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. Not everyone celebrated his success. Competitors tried to undermine Clear Ledger. Articles questioned his competence. Rumors circulated about his past failures. Ethan didn't respond. He learned long ago that noise fades, systems endure. One night, alone in his office, he walked to the window and looked out at the city. The same streets where he'd once walked feeling invisible, the same lights that had passed him by. Jake's voice echoed in his memory. Don't mess this up. Ethan whispered back, I won't. Years later, Clear Ledger expanded globally, reshaping how small businesses operated across continents. Ethan remained the same, quiet, deliberate, uninterested in celebrity. When a documentary crew followed him for a day, the director asked, Do you feel validated now? Ethan considered the question. Validation is temporary. Discipline lasts. The final scene of the documentary showed Ethan returning to the old cafe in Williamsburg, sitting at the same corner table where the idea had first taken shape. He opened his laptop, not to reflect, not to reminisce, but to work, because he never stopped. At a family gathering months later, Marcus approached him cautiously. I was wrong, his father said, voice low, about everything. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. I know, he said, but I didn't need you to say it. Marcus nodded, eyes moist. You built something incredible. Ethan shook his head gently. I built myself first. That night, Ethan returned home, sat in silence, and allowed himself one rare moment of reflection. Not on the money, not on the fame, but on the boy who had been told he'd never amount to anything. The boy who kept going anyway. If this story moved you, if you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or underestimated, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with the words, I'm still building. Because the future doesn't belong to the loudest voices. It belongs to the ones who refuse to quit. Everyone said he would fail. Except the future.